All right, so here we are in 127. And you see right now we're starting here, next week is a guest lecture. Then there's a couple of quizzes due, which you do in Canvas, and there's a project due. And there's a whole lot of projects. And of course, the projects are the heart of the class. Most students really don't want to read books and answer quizzes very much. You want to do hacking. So if you click projects, you get to a page full of projects. And all these projects, you go through the project and you'll find a flag, then you turn in the flag in Canvas. So you're going to need a Linux machine. Now, the way this class works, there's three major sections. First, we're going to do command injection, where you inject commands in high-level languages like Bash. So you do not need to use a disassembler, and you don't need to use assembly code. We're going to use high-level like SQL injection and so on. We'll do a few projects where you practice that. That is the simplest kind of exploits, where you do not have to do this memory corruption stuff. Then we're going to do the memory corruption on Linux, a whole series of them with a stack buffer overflow and a format string vulnerability and a heap overflow and a few other ones in 32 and 64-bit. And this 202 is really the heart of the whole course. That's the essence of it. You learn how to do a buffer overflow in all the situations. And then we do it all on Windows. Windows is far more complicated than Linux. It has a lot of defenses. So you have to get a Windows machine, and then we'll do various exploits attacking vulnerable software on Windows. And then we'll do some ARM, which is all extra credit because it involves hardware that not everybody will have. And there's just something we can play with at the end. I'll probably add a few more as we go ahead. Anyway, so to get started, the first thing you're going to need is a Linux machine. Now, if you already have a Linux machine of some kind, you can just use it. You do not need to have any particular version of Linux. Everything we're doing is so if you have a Kali machine or something, that'll be fine. But if you don't have a Linux machine and all you have is like a Mac or a PC, then, are Mac exploits covered? No, we're not going to do Mac exploits. So we're only going to do Linux. Mac exploits are much harder to create. Penetrate, no, you don't need this book, Pen Testing. I just put it here for reference. This is the one where we're getting most of the lectures. This book, I just point out because it has a good appendix. This is where I got the information to write 202 here. So it's a useful reference, but you don't need that book. This is the book we're going to use for most of what we're doing here. Anyway, so you have to make a Linux virtual machine, and I looked online and I found this is pretty easy. Put on some kind of hypervisor. There's VMware Workstation Player and Fusion are both free now. So this goes on Windows, this goes on the Mac. Once you've got that, you can just download a Debian machine pre-made. You can also, and then you can just import it, and you'll get a command line in your Debian machine where you can execute some command line commands. So that's all you do here. So that's the first project. You just get a Linux machine of any kind running, do this command, and then this part covered by a green box is the flag. So you turn in an image of your screen showing that flag and type the flag value into the box in Canvas where you turn it in, and that's how you get points for the first project. After you've got a Linux machine of some kind going, then I have a couple of projects where you just learn Linux. Here's one I wrote that's very simple, where you just practice executing some Linux commands and answer some questions. And then I found, after that, I found another one. I threw it in here for extra credit. Linux Journey is where you go to somebody else's website where they made a whole training product for Linux that gives you little pages of instructions, and it's really very good. So there's two things I want to point out here. This is very good for you. And the other thing I want to point out is all this extra credit. So the first number is the number of points of required work, and there's extra. So if you do these extra, there's tons of extra credit points, hundreds of points. You can do so many extra credit projects that it adds up to more than all the quizzes in the final exam. You can just ignore all that stuff and do hands-on projects instead if you want to, and that would be perfectly fine, because this is where the real action is, learning how to really do something. So anyway, to get your grade in the course is going to be calculated from these required points, and all the extra points are on top of that. So you can go over 100%. If you get 90% of the required points, you get an A, 80% a B, and so on. But that's the point. Most people would rather do more hacking and only look at the book when they have to, and that's fine with me. Anyway, all right. And high-level language compiler to any type of assembly. Yeah, that's cool. And people have a lot of good tips in the chat. Anyway, so make within the next couple of weeks, get a Linux machine running, And if you already know the Linux command line, you can just skip these projects. But if you don't, you should probably do one or both of these projects to practice learning the basic Linux commands. And then you can go on to your first exploit, which is here, command injection. And if you're taking my web hacking course, the first couple of these are the same. So here's command injection. If you have a router, your router typically has a page that lets you ping something to see if your network is working. So you can ping an address like 127.0.0.1. And so I put that here and send pings. It will show you, this is just the output of the ping. So you can kind of guess from the way this looks that it just executed a command line bash ping command, but I even tell you, I put the code here so you can see it. This is the code. I wrote this code, this PHP file, and here's what it does. It makes a command ping -C2 plus the address you put in, and then it executes that in the system. So it makes a line of code, including the data from the user. This is how you create command injection vulnerabilities. So, and by the way, I see a question here about somebody already CCSF. Yes, yeah, it's the same canvas. If you're in CCSF and you take this course, it'll appear in your standard CCSF canvas. And there's also an open canvas for everybody, for anybody that doesn't have that. Anyway, so this is how, so this means if I put a semicolon ls here, like that, then it's going to create the line ping -C2 127.0.0.1 semicolon ls. So it does the pings and then it does an ls. And ls just shows you the files on the server. So now you can execute commands on the server. And so you can do things like, for example, you can do date to see what time it is. And you can do who am I to see who you are. So if I do that, it does the ping, then it does ls, then it gives me the date, and then it tells me who I am, which is www data. And www data on a Linux machine is the Apache user. So I'm coming in through a web page through PHP, and I have the privileges of the Apache user. So I don't have root. There are certain things I couldn't do on the machine, but I can do quite a few things. And so there are some flags to find here if you learn some Linux commands like cat and grep and such. And here's a list of commands recommended. You can find some flags hidden on the server. And then there's more fun ones here. This one here is good, clean fun. Let me find an image. I'll just go here. There's an image. Open image in new tab. Okay, so here's an image. I'm just going to save that image on my desktop. bict.ping, that'll be a fine name. Okay, there's my image. Now I'm just going to send that image up to this page. So this is ImageMagick vulnerability, which is affected almost all Linux servers about 5 years ago. So I choose that file, desktop, bict, okay. And then when I upload the image, it's just going to create a thumbnail. And there's the thumbnail. And then when I click that, it goes to the full-size image, which is very much the same size in this case. But the point of this is, yeah, ImageMagick is used almost every Linux machine. It's the simplest, most popular image library. So this is the convert command, and that converts it to a thumbnail 300 by 300 and puts it in this folder, and that's the input. So that's what the command is. Normally it doesn't print out the command, but I modified this code to print out the command so we can see it. And the point is there's a vulnerability in that library. And here's the vulnerability. If you make a text file containing this content, which I'll do up here in a text editor, and I say, okay, I'm just going to save that. All right, didn't take it. Control C, Control V, okay. Oh, not letting me copy and paste. What's going on here? There, it finally worked. All right, so I'm going to save that on my desktop as exploit.png. You just have to make it look like an image. All right, so now when I send up that file, just a text file containing that data, instead of bict, I send exploit and upload. Now it prints hello and it prints out the date. So let's go back and look at what I put in there. What's going on here is the people that wrote the ImageMagick library, they made the same kind of mistake that I made in that ping form. They made a feature where you can add like a background color to your image. So you can add text inside the image file. I don't know why they did it this way, but they did. So you can make a box with this size and you can fill it with color, and the color can be dynamic. So it can load the color from a URL. So it'll fill it with a color gotten from a URL coming from this, a web address. And the way they did it was by using curl followed by that URL from the user. Just like I took ping and put user data at the end of it, they took curl and put user data at the end of it. So if you add the right punctuation marks, you can now add real Unix commands, Linux command, echo hello and date. And those are the two commands it executed where it printed hello and date. So you can now change these commands to other commands and execute commands on the server. That's another command injection vulnerability. And once again, there are some flags to find on the server as you hunt around using commands. And then there's Drupal. Drupal is a WordPress competitor you use to make websites, and it had a whole series of remote code exploit vulnerabilities. This we call them Drupalgeddon, Drupalgeddon 2, and Drupalgeddon 3. I think this one is Drupalgeddon 2, although I've forgotten. But anyway, so I just made a Drupal website in an old vulnerable version, and it kept getting hacked so often that I put it behind some authentication. You have to give it student 1 and student 1 just to stop automated processes from trashing it all the time. So it will stay up for like a few weeks at a time. So this is my Drupal website where it doesn't have anything, but it is vulnerable. And so if you get a machine with Python on it and run this script, this will create a file on the server. And the way it works is someplace in the email registration part of the website, there is a form. And in that form, there is a field that has the same kind of vulnerability. So again, after the right funny punctuation marks, you can now execute a command, echo smiley face into yourname.txt. So it'll create a file on the server containing a smiley face. And you cannot put a greater than in it because somehow that's filtered out. So you have to use other commands like pipe t, which amounts to the same thing as greater than. And this is very common in command injection exploits that certain characters can't get through. Could you use burp suite? Yes, I imagine you probably could if you ran this script and caught it. Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah. In principle, this looks like the kind of thing you could put in burp. Yeah. You'd either have to run it and catch it in burp, or you'd have to like Google and find somebody that gives you but yeah, I'm sure you could do it from command line curl too. Yeah, in lots of ways. All you're doing is sending a web request up to the server, because you can see down here, it's using the requests library, and here it's just doing a post. So the entire exploit is just one post. And so you could use any tool. You could use Postman too. Yeah, anything that can send a post. I added this basic authentication with student 1 there. That was my contribution here. But anyway, so now this is, again, puts a smiley face in that file, but you can change those to do other things. And now you can hunt around on that server and find some flags. So that should get you started. Those are the first few projects. And so feel free to do the projects, focus on the ones of interest to you, skip ahead. You can, or do go at whatever pace suits you. A flag looks like. Yeah, the flags are described in the project. So here, this one here tells you where they are, and you could see the first one right away. When I did ls, you could see all you had to do is look in that file. So the files are in fact named flag in this case. So right there is flag1.txt. Inside that file is the first flag. And if you hunt around, you'll find the others. Sometimes they're harder, but in this case, they're all in files named flag, I think. And I think down at the end here, this one, you are going to have to run a program to create the file. People have to struggle with that one a bit, so I gave it a few more points. Anyway, so that should give you, this is like common CTF kind of problems, but that's the point. This part here, you do not need binary or assembly code. Anyway, that should get you started. You should all get your Linux machine up and start doing some projects. And if you don't like a project, just skip it and go to the next. There's plenty of them. I hope you all get going on it. So I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to